What happens when an empire that has conquered 1,000 worlds finally meets the one species that refuses to kneel? What happens when beings who have never known defeat encounter creatures so stubborn, so impossibly defiant, that they would rather burn their own worlds than submit? The Kethvar Empire had a simple philosophy: submit or perish. For 3 millennia, this approach had worked flawlessly across the galaxy. Species after species had looked upon their vast fleets, their overwhelming technology, their unstoppable war machines, and had chosen the wisdom of surrender over the futility of resistance. But humanity was different. Humanity was broken. When the ultimatum came, kneel or be destroyed, the human response was not what the Empire expected. There was no desperate plea for mercy, no frantic attempt at negotiation, no last-minute offer of conditional surrender. Instead, there was silence, a long, terrible silence that stretched across the void of space. And then, from the depths of that silence, came 3 words that would echo through the galaxy and change the course of history forever. Release the Black. The Kethvar had conquered the known galaxy, but they had never encountered humanity's greatest secret, an army so dangerous that humanity had locked it away and sworn never to use it again. An army of their own kind that they feared more than any alien threat. An army that was about to remind the universe why humans had once been the most terrified species in their own mythology. The Black Army was coming, and the galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the largest armada in galactic history position itself around Earth. The Kethvar fleet stretched beyond the horizon of space, their crystalline ships gleaming like deadly jewels against the starfield. Each vessel was larger than Earth's largest city, and there were thousands of them. "Admiral, incoming transmission from the Kethvar flagship," reported Lieutenant Torres from the communication station. His voice carried the weight of a man who knew he was about to hear humanity's death sentence. "Put it through," Chen replied, her voice steady despite the churning in her stomach. Behind her, the bridge crew worked in tense silence, their faces pale but determined. They all knew what was coming. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the imposing figure of War Master Thekvar, Supreme Commander of the Kethvar military. His species stood nearly 8 feet tall, with 4 arms that ended in razor-sharp claws and skin that looked like polished obsidian. His eyes, all 6 of them, burned with an inner fire that had watched worlds burn for 3,000 years. "Humans of Earth," Thekvar's voice boomed across the bridge, translated by the ship's computers into perfect English. "I am War Master Thekvar of the Kethvar Empire. Your primitive species has been evaluated and found adequate for integration into our domain." Chen kept her expression neutral, though every word felt like a blade twisting in her chest. Integration was just a pretty word for slavery. She had seen the reports from the outer colonies, the footage from worlds that had already fallen. The lucky ones became servants, the unlucky ones became food. "You have 1 standard galactic day to consider our generous offer," Thekvar continued, his mandibles clicking in what might have been amusement. "Surrender unconditionally, and your species will be preserved to serve the Empire. Resist, and we will demonstrate why 1,000 civilizations have chosen wisdom over defiance." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in suffocating silence. Chen turned to her communications officer. "Lieutenant Torres, open a channel to Fleet Command." "Channel open, Admiral." "This is Admiral Chen to all ships and stations. Execute Protocol 7 immediately. I repeat, execute Protocol 7. Authorization, Chen Delta, 97 Alpha." The bridge crew exchanged glances. Protocol 7 was theoretical, something they had trained for but never expected to actually implement. It was the protocol for the unthinkable, the protocol for when humanity faced extinction and had no choice but to open doors that should never be opened. "Admiral," Torres said, his voice barely above a whisper, "Protocol 7 requires unanimous consent from the Global Defense Council. We don't have—" "We have it," Chen interrupted, pulling up her command display. "The vote was taken 6 hours ago when our deep space monitors first detected the Kethvar fleet. The vote was unanimous. Even the pacifist coalition voted yes." She paused, letting that sink in. The pacifist coalition had opposed every military action for the past 50 years. If they were voting to activate Protocol 7, then everyone understood just how desperate their situation had become. "Admiral," came the voice of Dr. Marcus Webb from the science station. "Are you sure about this? The Black Army has been sealed for 200 years. The psychological evaluations, the containment protocols, The what, Doctor? Chen turned to face him, her eyes blazing.
The monsters?
The war criminals? The butchers who made our own species afraid to sleep at night? Webb nodded reluctantly. Yes, Admiral. Those. Chen looked back at the screen showing the HFY fleet. She thought about her daughter living in New Geneva, about her grandchildren who would never grow up if humanity fell today. She thought about the billions of humans across dozens of worlds, all looking to people like her to protect them. Dr. Webb, do you know what the first rule of warfare is? No, Admiral. When someone tries to make you extinct, you stop worrying about being the good guys. Chen's voice was cold now, filled with a resolve that made even her veteran crew members shiver. Lieutenant Torres, send the activation codes to Facility Black. Torres hesitated for a moment, then began entering the commands. Admiral, the facility is asking for final confirmation. They want to know if we're absolutely certain we want to. Wake them up. Chen closed her eyes for a moment, thinking about the classified files she had read when she first achieved flag rank. The files that explained why humanity had developed faster than light travel, why they had spread across the galaxy with such desperate speed, why they had built colonies in the most remote and dangerous regions of space. They hadn't been exploring, they had been running. Running from what they had created during the Third World War. Running from the soldiers they had engineered to be perfect killers. Running from an army that had won the war so completely, so brutally, that humanity had been forced to lock them away rather than risk them turning their attention to the rest of the human race. Tell them yes, Chen said quietly. Tell them that Admiral Sarah Chen, on behalf of the human species, authorizes the release of the Black Army. Tell them the war is about to begin. On Earth, in a facility buried 3 miles beneath the Swiss Alps, alarms began to sound for the first time in 2 centuries. Ancient systems came online, power flowed through cables that had been dark for longer than most civilizations had existed, and in the deepest chamber of the complex, 200 coffins began to open. The Black Army was waking up. Colonel Marcus Kane was the first to open his eyes. For a moment he lay still, processing the sensory input. The taste of recycling fluid in his mouth, the feeling of synthetic atmosphere filling his lungs, the gentle hum of machinery that had kept him alive for how long? His enhanced memory banks activated, downloading mission parameters and situational updates directly into his consciousness. 200 years. They had been asleep for 200 years, and now? Now there was another war. Kane sat up in his pod, his genetically enhanced physique showing no signs of the centuries of sleep. Around him, his soldiers were awakening as well. Men and women who had been created for one purpose, to end wars so completely that no one would ever want to fight again. Status report. Kane's voice carried absolute authority, even though he hadn't spoken in 2 centuries. All personnel accounted for, Colonel. Came the immediate response from Sergeant Maya Reeves, his second in command. Like Kane, she looked exactly as she had the day they had been put to sleep. The Black Army didn't age. They didn't get sick. They didn't break. They just killed and kept killing until there was nothing left to kill. Threat assessment? Kane asked as he stepped out of his pod. His body moved with inhuman grace, every muscle fiber engineered for maximum efficiency. He was faster than any normal human, stronger than any normal human, and infinitely more dangerous than any normal human. Alien Invasion Force. Species designation HFY. Fleet strength, approximately 12,000 ships. Technological advantage, significant. Estimated human casualties if current defensive measures fail, 100%. Kane nodded. It was exactly the kind of scenario they had been created for. An enemy so powerful that conventional forces were useless. An enemy that threatened human extinction. An enemy that needed to be taught why humans had once been the most feared species in their own galaxy. Armament status? Full arsenal available, Colonel. Class 7 combat suits, Reaper-class weapons, and... Reeves paused. Permission to access the Omega Cache? Kane considered this. The Omega Cache contained weapons so devastating that their use was restricted even by the standards of the Black Army. Weapons that could crack planets, weapons that could ignite stars, weapons that had ended the Third World War in a matter of hours. Granted, Kane said simply. If they were going to do this, they were going to do it right. Within an hour, the Black Army was fully operational. 200 soldiers who had been engineered to be perfect killing machines, equipped with weapons that normal humans weren't even allowed to know existed. They stood in formation in the facility's main chamber waiting for orders. Kane activated the communication system, connecting to Admiral Chen on the Defiance. Admiral Chen, this is Colonel Kane of the Black Army. We are operational and ready for deployment. On the bridge of the Defiance, Chen felt a chill run down her spine as she heard Kane's voice. There was something inhuman about it, something that spoke of absolute confidence and infinite capacity for violence. Colonel Kane, the Kethvar have given us 1 day to surrender. I need them to understand that surrender is not a word in the human vocabulary. Understood, Admiral. Do you have specific operational parameters, or shall we proceed with standard doctrine? Chen thought about the standard doctrine. The Black Army's standard operating procedure was simple. Identify the enemy's leadership, neutralize it in the most spectacular way possible, then systematically dismantle their entire command structure until surrender was the only option. Standard doctrine, Colonel. But Kane, make sure they remember this. Make sure every species in the galaxy knows what happens when someone tries to make humanity kneel. Affirmative, Admiral. Beginning operations immediately. The transmission ended, and Chen turned to her crew. All ships, prepare for combat operations. The Black Army is going to war. In space around Earth, the Kethvar fleet maintained its positions, confident in their overwhelming superiority. War Master Thekvar stood in his command chamber, reviewing deployment plans for the inevitable human surrender. In his experience, even the most stubborn species eventually recognized the futility of resistance. He was about to learn that humans were very different from other species. On his tactical display, a small alarm began to sound. A single human ship had detached from the defensive formation and was moving toward the Kethvar fleet. It was tiny compared to even the smallest Kethvar vessel, barely the size of a shuttlecraft. Tekvar clicked his mandibles in amusement. Are they sending us an envoy? Have they decided to surrender early? Unknown, War Master, replied his tactical officer. The ship is not responding to our hails. Then destroy it. Make an example of their foolishness. 3 Kethvar destroyers moved to intercept the tiny human craft. Their plasma cannons powered up, ready to vaporize the ship in a single volley. But as they prepared to fire, something impossible happened. The human ship simply disappeared. Where did it go? The Kvar demanded. Unknown, War Master. It just vanished from our sensors. Before anyone could respond, alarms began screaming throughout the Kethvar flagship. The ship's massive hull shuddered as something impacted it from within. What was that? Thekvar roared. War Master, we're detecting massive internal explosions. Decks 17 through 22 have been destroyed. We're also receiving reports from other ships in the fleet. They're experiencing similar attacks. Thekvar's eyes widened in disbelief. How is that possible? Nothing got through our shields. His answer came in the form of a transmission that appeared on every screen in the Kethvar fleet. The image showed a human soldier in black armor, his face hidden behind a helmet that seemed to absorb light itself. Attention, Kethvar Empire, the figure spoke, his voice carrying across space to every ship in the fleet. This is Colonel Kane of the Human Black Army. You demanded that humanity kneel. We decline. As he spoke, explosions continued to ripple through the Kethvar fleet. Ships that had been considered impregnable were being torn apart from within by forces that seemed impossible. You made a mistake, Kane continued. You assumed that because we appeared weak, we were weak. You assumed that because we seemed primitive, we were primitive. But you never asked the important question. If humans are so weak, why do they spread across the galaxy like they're running from something? More explosions, more ships dying. The mighty Kethvar Armada was being systematically destroyed by an enemy they couldn't even see. The answer is simple, Kane said. They were running from us, from what we became during our last great war, from the monsters they created to save themselves from extinction. The Kvar watched in horror as his fleet, the greatest military force in galactic history, was reduced to floating debris by an enemy that seemed to exist outside the laws of physics. We are the Black Army, Kane's voice continued, cold and implacable. We are what happens when humans stop pretending to be civilized. We are what happens when you threaten our species with extinction. The transmission ended, but the destruction continued. In the space of an hour, 12,000 Kethvar ships were reduced to wreckage. The empire that had conquered 1,000 worlds had been broken by an enemy they had never seen coming. And on Earth, Admiral Chen watched the tactical display in stunned silence, wondering if humanity had just saved itself or doomed itself by unleashing the Black Army once again. The Kethvar homeworld of Thekvarnis had not seen warfare in over 1,000 years. Nestled in the heart of the Empire, surrounded by dozens of heavily fortified star systems, It was considered the most secure planet in the galaxy. The capital city of Morthek stretched across 3 continents, housing over 40 billion HFY citizens, and serving as the administrative center for an empire that spanned half the known galaxy. Emperor Vashtar the Eternal stood in his crystalline palace, gazing out at the city that had been built to celebrate his people's dominance over all other species. The towers stretched impossibly high into the sky, each one a monument to another conquered world, another species brought to heel. For 3 millennia, this had been the center of civilization, the heart of order in a chaotic universe. That was about to change. "Your Eternal Majesty," came the trembling voice of Fleet Admiral Morgek as he entered the throne chamber. "We have received word from the Sol system." Vashtar didn't turn around. He was ancient even by HFY standards, having ruled for over 2,000 years. In all that time, no bearer of bad news had ever entered his presence with good posture. "Speak. The fleet has been destroyed, Your Majesty." Now Vashtar turned, his 6 eyes focusing on the Admiral, with the intensity of stars going supernova. "Destroyed? 12,000 ships? The greatest armada in galactic history? Destroyed by a species that barely understands gravity manipulation?" "Yes, Your Majesty." War Master Thakvar's final transmission indicated they encountered some kind of advanced human military unit, something they called the Black Army. Vashtar's expression didn't change, but his claws extended from their sheaths, scoring deep grooves in the crystalline floor. The Black Army. He had heard that term before, in intelligence reports from the Outer Rim, in whispers from species that had encountered humans during their expansion phase 2 centuries ago. "How many survivors?" "None, Your Majesty." The silence that followed was so complete that the Admiral could hear his own hearts beating. Finally Vashtar spoke, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Mobilize the core fleets. All of them. I want every ship, every weapon, every soldier we have positioned between this world and human space." "Yes, Your Majesty. Should we also recall the garrison fleets from the conquered territories?" "Do it. Strip every system if necessary. If these humans want a war, we will give them such a war that they will beg for the chance to kneel." As the Admiral hurried away to implement the orders, Vashtar returned to his window. He had built this empire on the principle of overwhelming force. When faced with rebellion or resistance, the response was always the same: deploy such massive military superiority that the enemy lost all hope of victory. It had worked for 3,000 years. It was about to fail spectacularly. 3 light-years away, Colonel Kane stood in the command center of the Black Army's mobile operations base. The facility existed in a state of quantum flux, simultaneously present and absent in normal space-time. It was technology that normal humans couldn't even comprehend, much less build. It had been created during the darkest days of the Third World War, when humanity had pushed the boundaries of physics itself in their desperate attempt to create the perfect soldiers. "Status report, Sergeant Reeves," Kane said as he studied the holographic display showing the HFY Empire's response to the destruction of their fleet. "They're mobilizing everything, Colonel. 15 core fleets, approximately 100,000 ships. They're also recalling garrison forces from their conquered territories." "Predictable," Kane replied. "They're thinking in terms of conventional warfare. Mass versus mass, fleet versus fleet. Should we intercept them before they reach human space?" Kane considered this. The Black Army was capable of many things that defied conventional military thinking, but even they had limitations. 100,000 ships represented a significant challenge, even for soldiers who had been engineered to be perfect. "Negative. We're going to do something they won't expect." "Sir?" Kane smiled, an expression that would have terrified any normal human who saw it. "We're going to ignore their fleets entirely and go straight for their leadership. Sergeant, prepare the Omega Protocol." Reeves hesitated. "Sir, the Omega Protocol is designed for planetary termination. Are you planning to—" "I'm planning to end this war in the most efficient way possible. The HFY understand only one thing: superior force. We're going to demonstrate force so superior that they'll spend the next 1,000 years telling stories about it." Kane turned to address the rest of his team. 200 soldiers stood at attention, each one a masterpiece of genetic engineering and cybernetic enhancement. They had been created to be the ultimate expression of human military capability, and they had proven their worth during the Third World War by ending a global conflict in just 72 hours. "Listen carefully," Kane began. "The enemy believes they can defeat us through numbers. They're mobilizing their entire military to crush human space through overwhelming force. This is exactly what we want them to do." He activated a holographic display showing the HFY home system. While they're busy positioning their fleets for a conventional attack, We're going to do what we do best. We're going to appear where they least expect us and eliminate their capacity to wage war. Lieutenant Sarah Cross, the team's intelligence specialist, raised her hand. Colonel, our deep space reconnaissance indicates that the Kethvar homeworld has defensive systems that surpass anything we encountered at Earth. Planetary shields, automated defense platforms, garrison forces numbering in the millions. Excellent, Kane replied. The stronger their defenses, the more confident they'll be that they're safe. Confidence breeds complacency, and complacency gets people killed. He moved to the center of the chamber, where a massive tactical display showed real-time intelligence data from across the Kethvar Empire. The plan is simple. We're going to infiltrate their homeworld, eliminate their leadership, and destroy their ability to coordinate military operations across the galaxy. Sir, interjected Corporal David Martinez, the team's weapons specialist. Even with our capabilities, taking on an entire planet seems ambitious. Kane's smile widened. Corporal, during the Third World War, this unit was tasked with ending a global conflict that had been raging for 15 years. The major powers had armies numbering in the hundreds of millions, weapons that could level mountains, defensive systems that made assault seem impossible. He paused, letting that information sink in. Most of the Black Army remembered the war, but even they sometimes forgot the sheer scale of what they had accomplished. We ended that war in 72 hours. Not by fighting their armies, not by destroying their weapons, but by making their leadership simply cease to exist. By the time we were finished, there was no one left with the authority to continue the fighting. The room fell silent as the soldiers contemplated what Kane was saying. The Third World War had ended not with a peace treaty or a negotiated settlement, but with the complete disappearance of every major political and military leader on the planet. Presidents, prime ministers, generals, admirals, all gone, vanished without a trace, leaving behind power vacuums so complete that the war had simply stopped because no one was left to order it to continue. The Kethvar Empire consists of over 10,000 worlds, Kane continued, but it all flows from one source, Emperor Vashtar and his immediate council. Remove them, and the Empire becomes a collection of isolated systems with no central coordination. He activated another display, this one showing the internal structure of the Kethvar Palace complex on their home world. The intelligence was impossibly detailed, showing room layouts, security protocols, even the personal schedules of individual guards. How do we have this level of intel? Asked Lieutenant Cross. Because we've been there, Kane replied simply. For the past 6 hours, while the Kethvar have been mobilizing their fleets, teams from the Black Army have been conducting reconnaissance operations throughout their home system. The implications of that statement hit the soldiers like a physical blow. While they had been awakening from their 200-year sleep, some of their number had already been deployed, had already penetrated the heart of the Kethvar Empire without anyone noticing. The palace complex houses not just the Emperor, but the entire military command structure. The High Command, the fleet coordinators, the Strategic Planning Division. Everyone who matters is in one place. Kane gestured to the display. At 0800 local time tomorrow, Emperor Vashtar will be holding an emergency war council with all senior military leaders to plan the invasion of human space. It will be the largest gathering of Kethvar leadership in their history. And we're going to crash their party, Reeves said with understanding. Exactly. But we're not just going to eliminate them. We're going to make sure every Kethvar in the galaxy understands exactly what happened to their leaders and why. We're going to make them understand that humans are not a species you threaten with extinction. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of preparation and planning. The Black Army moved with the precision of a machine, each soldier carrying out their assigned tasks with inhuman efficiency. Weapons were prepared, equipment was tested, and infiltration routes were planned and replanned until every possible contingency had been accounted for. At exactly 0600 local time on Thekvarnis, as the planet's twin suns began to rise over the capital city of Morthik, the Black Army began their assault. They didn't arrive in ships. They didn't drop from orbit in assault pods. They simply appeared, materializing inside the palace complex as if they had always been there. The quantum displacement technology that made this possible was beyond the understanding of any species other than humans, and even most humans didn't know it existed. Emperor Vashtar was reviewing battle plans in his private study when his personal guards simply stopped moving. For a moment, he thought they had fallen asleep standing up, which seemed impossible. Then he noticed that they were still breathing, still blinking, that their minds were simply gone. "Your Eternal Majesty," came a voice from behind him. Vashtar spun around to see a figure in black armor standing in the center of his study, somehow having appeared in a room that had been sealed from the inside. "Who dares enter the presence of the Eternal Emperor?" Vashtar demanded, his voice carrying all the authority of 3 millennia of absolute rule. Colonel Kane, representing the human species. The figure replied calmly. We need to talk. Vashtar's claws extended and his 6 eyes blazed with fury. Guards! Security! They can't hear you, Kane said. They're alive, but their neural pathways have been temporarily disrupted. They'll recover in a few hours, assuming they're still relevant by then. The Emperor reached for the emergency communication device on his desk, but his hand passed right through it, as if it weren't there. Holographic projection, Kane explained. You're seeing a quantum echo of reality from approximately 30 seconds ago. The actual device was disabled when I arrived. What do you want? Vashtar snarled. I want you to understand something very important, Kane replied. Your empire declared war on humanity. You demanded that we kneel. We declined. Now you're mobilizing your entire military to destroy our species. And we will succeed, Vashtar hissed. No species has ever stood against the might of the Kethvar Empire. That's where you're wrong, Kane said. You see, you've made a fundamental error in understanding what humans are. You looked at our colonies, our defensive fleets, our apparent technology level, and you concluded that we were weak. Kane moved closer, and Vashtar could feel something radiating from the human that made his primitive hindbrain scream warnings about apex predators. But you never asked why a species that appeared so weak had spread so far across the galaxy. You never wondered why we built colonies in the most remote, dangerous regions of space. You never questioned why we seemed so afraid of our own home worlds. Enlighten me, Vashtar said, trying to maintain his imperial dignity even as his body trembled with instinctive terror. We weren't exploring, Your Eternal Majesty. We were running. Running from what we had become during our last great war. Running from the monsters we had created to save ourselves from extinction. Kane gestured to himself. I am one of those monsters. We are what happens when humans stop pretending to be civilized. We are what happens when you threaten our species with extinction. As if summoned by his words, the walls of the study began to display images from across the palace complex. Kethvar guards falling to unseen attackers. Military commanders simply vanishing from their posts. The entire command structure of the Empire's military being systematically dismantled by enemies who moved like ghosts and struck like lightning. This is impossible, Vashtar whispered. No, Kane corrected. This is inevitable. Your empire is built on the principle that overwhelming force can solve any problem. But we are the overwhelming force, Your Majesty. We are what force looks like when it's been perfected. The images continued to play, showing the systematic destruction of the Kethvar military hierarchy. Within an hour, every senior military officer in the Empire had been eliminated or captured. Every communication hub had been seized. Every defensive system had been neutralized. Your war fleets are now without command, Kane continued. Your conquered territories are without oversight. Your empire has effectively ceased to exist as a functioning entity. Vashtar collapsed into his throne, the weight of 3 millennia of rule suddenly crushing him. What do you want? He asked again. But this time his voice was broken, defeated. I want you to send a message, Kane replied, to every species in this galaxy. I want you to tell them what happened here today. I want you to explain that the human species is not to be threatened, not to be attacked, not to be enslaved. And if I refuse? Kane smiled beneath his helmet. Then you'll join your military commanders in irrelevance. But understand this, Your former Majesty. This war ends today, one way or another. Either you help us end it peacefully, or we finish what you started in ways that will make your species remember this day for the rest of their existence. The choice was not really a choice at all. Vashtar activated his personal communication system and began composing a message that would be broadcast across the entire Kethvar Empire. A message that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. A message that would ensure that no species would ever again make the mistake of demanding that humanity kneel. The message that Emperor Vashtar transmitted across the galaxy would be remembered as the most significant broadcast in galactic history. Standing in his ruined palace, surrounded by the evidence of his empire's complete military collapse, the former master of 1,000 worlds spoke words that would reshape the political landscape of known space forever. Citizens of the Kethvar Empire, subjects of conquered worlds, free peoples of the galaxy. His voice carried across faster-than-light communication networks to every inhabited system within 50,000 light-years. I am Emperor Vashtar the Eternal. And I speak to you today not as your conqueror, but as a being who has learned a terrible truth about the nature of power. In his throne room, Colonel Kane stood silently, monitoring communications from across the galaxy. The Black Army had not just captured the Emperor, they had taken control of every major communication hub in Kethvar space, ensuring that this message could not be suppressed or altered. 3 days ago, we demanded that the human species submit to our authority. Vashtar continued, his voice heavy with the weight of absolute defeat. We believed, as we have always believed, that overwhelming military force was sufficient to ensure compliance. We were wrong. Across the galaxy, on thousands of worlds, billions of beings stopped what they were doing to listen. The Kethvar Empire had seemed invincible for 3 millennia. The idea that anyone could challenge it, much less defeat it, was unthinkable. The humans possess military capabilities that exceed our understanding, the Emperor said. They have demonstrated the ability to project force across any distance, to neutralize any defense, to eliminate any threat with precision that defies comprehension. In the space of less than 72 hours, they have dismantled our entire military command structure without firing a single shot at our civilian populations. Kane allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The Black Army had indeed been precise in their targeting. Every Kethvar military leader above the rank of brigade commander had been eliminated or captured, but not a single civilian had been harmed. It was a demonstration of control power that would resonate across the galaxy. Effective immediately, the Kethvar Empire recognizes human space as sovereign territory, Vashtar announced. All military operations against human colonies are hereby terminated. All claims to human worlds are renounced. The Empire will not attempt any form of retaliation or future aggression against the human species. On Earth, Admiral Chen watched the broadcast from the bridge of the Defiance. Around her, the bridge crew maintained professional silence, but she could see the relief in their eyes. Humanity had not just survived its first encounter with the Galactic Empire. They had emerged as the dominant power. Furthermore, Vashtar continued, the Empire hereby grants independence to all conquered territories that wish to secede from Kethvar rule. Any world that chooses to remain within the Empire will do so as an equal partner, not as a subjugated colony. This announcement sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Hundreds of species that had lived under Kethvar domination for millennia suddenly found themselves free to choose their own destinies. It was the largest act of decolonization in galactic history. To the human species, Vashtar's voice took on a tone of deep respect mixed with fear. The Kethvar Empire formally apologizes for our aggression and offers our friendship. We hope that you will prove more merciful in victory than we were in conquest. The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy in stunned silence. Within hours, however, that silence gave way to chaos as dozens of worlds declared their independence from Kethvar rule. Ancient grievances surfaced as liberated species began settling scores that had festered for centuries. But humanity's work was not finished. In the depths of space, far from any inhabited system, the Black Army's mobile command center materialized in normal space-time. Colonel Kane stood before a gathering of his soldiers, reviewing the aftermath of their operation. Status report, he commanded. All primary objectives achieved, Colonel, reported Sergeant Reeves. The Kethvar military hierarchy has been eliminated. Their emperor has publicly surrendered and granted independence to conquered territories. Their war fleets are in complete disarray without central command. Casualties? 0 on our side. Kethvar military casualties were kept to a minimum as ordered. No civilian casualties reported. Kane nodded. The Black Army's rules of engagement had been very specific. Eliminate the enemy's capacity to wage war while minimizing unnecessary death. They were soldiers, not butchers, despite what their reputation might suggest. What's our intelligence on the galactic situation? Kane asked. Lieutenant Cross stepped forward, activating a holographic display that showed the current state of affairs across known space. 14 major worlds have already declared independence from the Kethvar Empire. The Zephyrian Republic is mobilizing to reclaim territories taken from them 800 years ago. The Crystalline Collective is demanding reparations for 3 centuries of resource extraction. And the other galactic powers? They're watching carefully. The Andromedans have sent diplomatic feelers to human space. The Magellan Confederation is requesting formal recognition of their territorial claims. Everyone wants to know where humanity fits into the new galactic order. Kane considered this. The destruction of the Kethvar Empire had created a massive power vacuum. If humanity didn't fill it responsibly, the galaxy could descend into chaos that would make the Third World War look like a minor skirmish. Colonel, came the voice of Admiral Chen through the communication system. We need to discuss the future of the Black Army. Kane had been expecting this conversation. The Black Army had been created for a specific purpose, to end threats to human existence so completely that those threats would never arise again. Now that they had achieved that goal, the question became what to do with soldiers who were too dangerous to integrate into normal society, but too valuable to simply put back to sleep. Admiral, we need to meet in person. There are decisions that can't be made over subspace communication. Agreed. Can you return to Earth? Kane looked around at his soldiers. 200 perfect killers who had just demonstrated that they could topple galactic empires. 200 beings who existed outside normal human society because they were what happened when humans stopped being human. Yes, Admiral, but we need to discuss not just our future, but humanity's role in the galaxy. Whether we like it or not, we've just become the dominant military power in known space. That comes with responsibilities. 48 hours later, Kane stood in the secure conference room beneath the Swiss Alps where the Black Army had been awakened. Present were Admiral Chen, Dr. Marcus Webb, and Director Elizabeth Harrison of the Global Defense Council. The room was the most secure location on Earth, shielded against every form of surveillance known to human science. Colonel Kane, Director Harrison, began, "The Global Defense Council has been debating what to do with the Black Army now that the immediate crisis has passed." "And what have you decided?" Kane asked, though his enhanced intuition already knew the answer. "We can't put you back to sleep," Admiral Chen said. "The galaxy has seen what you can do. Every species out there is either planning how to ally with us or how to defend against us. We need the Black Army active and ready. But we also can't let you operate without oversight, Dr. Kiss," Webb added. "The psychological profiles are clear. Extended activation without proper mission parameters leads to problems." Kane nodded. During the Third World War, several units of enhanced soldiers had gone rogue when they ran out of legitimate targets. The results had been catastrophic enough that the entire enhanced soldier program had been shut down immediately after the war ended. "What do you propose?" Kane asked. Director Harrison activated a holographic display. "We're creating a new organization, the Galactic Security Division. Its mission will be to maintain peace and stability across human space and our allied territories." "You want us to become galactic peacekeepers," Kane said. "We want you to become what you've always been," Admiral Chen replied. "The ultimate deterrent against anyone who threatens human interests. But this time, with proper oversight and clear mission parameters." Kane studied the organizational chart that appeared on the display. The Galactic Security Division would operate under civilian authority, but with significant autonomy in the field. It would have access to the most advanced technology humanity could develop, and would be responsible for protecting not just human worlds, but any civilization that chose to ally with humanity. "What about the other enhanced units?" Kane asked. During the Third World War, the Black Army had been just one of several enhanced soldier programs. The others had been put into even deeper storage after the war ended. "They remain in storage for now," Director Harrison said. "The Black Army has proven that enhanced soldiers can be trusted with galactic-level responsibilities. If the situation requires it, we may awaken other units." Kane considered this. The idea of the Black Army operating as a permanent military force was both appealing and concerning. They had been created for war, but peace required different skills, different approaches to problem-solving. "We'll need new training protocols," he said finally, "new rules of engagement. The techniques we used to win the Third World War aren't appropriate for peacekeeping operations." "Agreed," Admiral Chen said. "We're prepared to give you whatever resources you need to develop those protocols." "And civilian oversight?" "Full transparency with the Global Defense Council," Director Harrison assured him. "Regular psychological evaluations for all Black Army personnel. Clear chains of command and responsibility." Kane looked around the room at the three people who would determine the future of his soldiers. They were good people, he knew. Intelligent, ethical, committed to human welfare. But they were also normal humans, and they could never truly understand what it meant to be, what the Black Army had become. "There's one more thing," Kane said. "The galaxy has seen what we can do when threatened, but they need to see what we can do when we're trying to help. The Black Army's first mission under the Galactic Security Division should be humanitarian in nature." "What do you have in mind?" Dr. Webb asked. Kane activated his own display, showing intelligence reports from across former HFY space. There are over 200 worlds that declared independence in the last week. Most of them have been under HFY rule for so long that they've forgotten how to govern themselves. Food distribution networks are breaking down. Local governments are collapsing. Millions of beings are going to die from starvation and civil unrest if someone doesn't intervene. You want the Black Army to provide humanitarian aid? I want the Black Army to save lives instead of taking them, Kane said simply. For 3 millennia, the galaxy has known only one kind of power, the power to destroy. We're going to show them a different kind of power, the power to build, to heal, to protect. Admiral Chen smiled. I think that's exactly what we need to do. Over the following months, the Galactic Security Division became a reality. The Black Army was deployed across dozens of worlds, not as conquerors but as protectors. They established food distribution networks on famine-stricken planets. They mediated disputes between newly independent governments. They provided security for refugee populations and helped rebuild infrastructure damaged during the collapse of the HFY Empire. The galaxy watched in amazement as the soldiers who had destroyed the most powerful military force in history dedicated themselves to saving lives and building peace. Species that had lived in fear of human aggression found themselves asking for human assistance. The reputation of the Black Army evolved from that of unstoppable killers to that of ultimate protectors. Colonel Kane stood on the observation deck of the GSD headquarters, a massive space station positioned at the edge of human space. Through the transparent aluminum viewport, he could see dozens of ships from across the galaxy arriving to request assistance or offer alliance with the human-led peace initiative. Any regrets? Asked Sergeant Reeves, joining him at the viewport. Kane considered the question. The Black Army would never again be normal humans. They would always exist on the margins of society, too dangerous for civilian life but too valuable to be discarded. But they had found a purpose beyond war, beyond destruction. No, Kane said finally. We were created to protect humanity from extinction. Now we're protecting the entire galaxy from the chaos that our own actions created. It's still the same mission, just on a larger scale. And if someone threatens the peace we built? Kane's reflection in the viewport smiled, and for a moment it looked almost human. Then they'll discover why the galaxy learned to fear the Black Army in the first place. In the depths of space, humanity's former enemies slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that the monsters who had defeated them were now the guardians of galactic peace. The Black Army had proven that humanity's greatest strength was not its capacity for violence, but its ability to choose when and how to use that violence in service of something greater than themselves. The galaxy would never again demand that humanity kneel. Instead, it would ask humanity to lead.